The Week 6 AP Top 25 poll was just released, and after a busy week in college basketball, we now have a new team at the number 1 spot. And in today's video, we are going to be breaking down the most recent AP Top 25 rankings, starting at number 25 and working our way to the number 1 team in the country. But before we get into the AP Top 25 poll, if you enjoy the content, please consider dropping a like on the video and subscribing to the channel. And now, let's jump into it. And as always, I wanted to quickly go over some of the teams that are receiving votes but just missed out on the rankings. And to start, we have the Iowa Hawkeyes, who are the first team out of the rankings for the second straight week. And I think they would have gotten in if they had a better showing against Michigan State, but they have another opportunity against Iowa State later this week. Next, we have Oklahoma State, and the Cowboys have won 9 straight to start the year, which is the program's longest win streak since 2006. And if they can beat their rival Oklahoma this coming weekend, they should be ranked in next week's poll, in my opinion. And Georgia is another team that could be ranked here soon, as the Bulldogs have snuck into the top 25 at KenPom and the top 20 of the net, and have a big opportunity this weekend in their game against Cincinnati. And then I have to mention USC, Kentucky, and Indiana, who have all dropped out of the rankings after their recent losses. But coming in at number 25 is UCLA, who climbs back into the AP Top 25 poll after a strong start to Big Ten play. The Bruins are now 7-2 overall and 2-0 in the conference, including a gritty 2-point road win over Washington and a home victory over Oregon. And in those two conference games, UCLA shot over 44% from deep, which isn't something we have seen them do earlier in the season. And with momentum building again, the Bruins now face a massive matchup against a ranked Gonzaga team this weekend, and a win there could send them up the rankings even more. Virginia is next and enters the AP poll for the first time this season at number 24, even after not receiving a single vote in last week's poll. But the Cavaliers are sitting at 8-1, with their only loss coming to Butler a few weeks ago, and Virginia looks really good in the analytics as they rank top 20 in both the net and KenPom. And one of the unique things about this team is that they are powered by an elite front court featuring 2 international players in Johan Gronlo and Tice DeRitter. And so far on the season, Virginia has big wins over Texas, Dayton, and Northwestern, and the Cavaliers look to be a legitimate dark horse in the ACC. Nebraska is back in the rankings for the first time since 2018 and is debuting at number 23 with a perfect 9-0 record. And the Cornhuskers have won 13 straight dating back to last season, which is actually the longest active streak in Division I, and are coming off a statement 71-50 win over Creighton. And the momentum for Nebraska is real right now, but the season-ending injury to Connor Essegian is concerning heading into a brutal stretch with matchups against Wisconsin and Illinois next. And if the Cornhuskers can somehow survive the next week and move to 11-0, they could find themselves ranked as a top 15 team in the country. Next is St. John's, who moves up to number 22 and is finally trending upward after a scrappy 63-58 win over Ole Miss. The Red Storm remain the Big East's only ranked team outside of UConn, so it's looking like the Johnnies don't have that many more opportunities for a big non-conference win outside of their showdown with Kentucky in a couple of weeks. And for St. John's, shooting and guard play remains their biggest flaw, as they are averaging just 33% from 3, but if they can continue defending and finding ways to grind out wins, the Johnnies could start working their way back up the top 25 rankings. Auburn drops 1 spot to number 21 after a tough 29-point loss at Arizona and fall to 7-3 overall, and all 3 of those losses have come against top 10 teams in Arizona, Michigan, and Houston, and I'm not sure many first-year head coaches have faced as brutal of a schedule as Stephen Pearl has in his first season at the helm. But despite these recent losses, Tahad Pettiford looks to have found his rhythm, scoring 24 or more points in 3 of his last 5 outings, and if the entire Auburn team can start playing well at the same time, then I think the Tigers will have a chance to compete in the SEC. Tennessee is next, and they took the biggest drop in this week's AP poll as they fell 7 spots to number 20 after losing 3 straight games, and each of their 3 losses came after the Vols led at halftime. And to make matters even worse, the Volunteers just recently announced that junior big man Cade Phillips will miss the remainder of the season after suffering a left shoulder injury that requires surgery. So the early growing pains are real for Rick Barnes' squad this season, but the Vols have a chance to bounce back soon with Louisville on the schedule next week, and a win against the Cardinals will give them their second quad 1 win of the season. Next is Kansas, who rises 2 spots to number 19 and was boosted by the return of star freshman guard Darren Peterson in an 80-60 rivalry win over Missouri. And if you watch the game, you could just see how Peterson's presence elevates the Jayhawks offense, which has consistently scored more when he's been available and played in the game. But earlier last week, Kansas actually suffered its 3rd loss of the season in a 61-56 defeat against UConn at home. But with Peterson back now and momentum seemingly building again, Kansas Kansas has a strong chance to continue climbing up the rankings, especially with a win over NC State, and if Peterson stays healthy, I truly think Kansas can compete for the top of the Big 12. Florida dropped 3 spots to number 18 after a heartbreaking 67-66 loss at Duke, and in the game, the defending champs erased a 15-point deficit before falling short late, and now Florida has a 5-3 record on the season, but the predictive metrics still see them as a top 15 caliber team, and they'll have another opportunity to prove it when they take on a top 5 team in the country in the UConn Huskies later this week, and this might be one of the most important games of Florida's season, as a win could reset their trajectory, while another loss would raise even more questions about whether this team belongs in the national title conversation. But it was actually Arkansas who made one of the biggest leaps in this week's poll, as they are up 8 spots to number 17 after a pair of convincing wins this past week. The Razorbacks knocked off number 6 Louisville 89-80 and then crushed Fresno State 82-58 to move to 7-2 on the season. And after nearly falling out of the rankings entirely, the Hogs are surging back up and look much closer to what we thought they were going to be in the preseason. And now the Razorbacks turn their attention to a top 25 showdown with Texas Tech this weekend, and if Arkansas gets a win there, then they should for sure be in the top 15 of next week's poll. But just above the Razorbacks is Texas Tech, who climbs 3 spots to number 16 and is now 7-2 on the year as well, and is currently on a 3-game winning streak, including a dominant win over an undefeated LSU team. And the Red Raiders have strong predictive metrics and are top 20 in both the net and KenPom, and although they have struggled at times this year, I still have a lot of belief in this Texas Tech team, especially with JT Toppin playing like he is. He's looking like an All-American, and just as I mentioned for Arkansas, if the Red Raiders can come out with a win over the Razorbacks, it would cement them as a clear top 15 and maybe even top 10 team in the country. Next, we have the Vanderbilt Commodores, who rise to number 15 in this week's poll, which is the program's highest ranking since 2011. And Vanderbilt is actually the only unbeaten team remaining in the SEC Conference at 9-0 on the year. And to me, the Commodores quietly have one of the strongest resumes in college basketball, with wins over SMU, St. Mary's, VCU, and UCF, and they've been dominant and have won all but one of their games by at least 15 points. And I honestly believe Mark Byington's team should be ranked a few spots higher than this, and the analytics back me up, as they are considered a top 10 team in just about any metric you look at. And so far this season, Vanderbilt has looked like a legitimate SEC contender to me. But right in front of Vandy is North Carolina, who jumps 2 spots to number 14 after a massive road win, beating Kentucky 67-64. And the Tar Heels followed that up with a dominant 20-point victory at home against Georgetown to improve to 8-1, with their only loss coming to Michigan State so far. And it's hard to talk about North Carolina without mentioning their front court, as the duo of Caleb Wilson and Henry Vasar has been absolutely elite. And with a few bye games on the schedule before facing Ohio State in a couple of weeks, UNC is positioned to keep climbing the rankings, and I wouldn't be surprised if we see them in the top 10 before the end of the year. Illinois comes in at number 13 after handling Tennessee this past week and improving to a 7-2 record with 2 top 15 wins already on the resume over the Volunteers and the Texas Tech Red Raiders. And their only setbacks so far have come against UConn and Alabama, and I would consider both of those teams to be national title contenders. But the big news this week for the Illini was freshman Keaton Wagler, who had his best game yet with 16 points, 8 boards, and 5 assists against Tennessee, and he's just another weapon to an already loaded group for Illinois. And with Big Ten play underway, the Illini have a tricky road trip coming up, but with the wins, they could crack the top 10 here soon. At number 12 is Alabama, who holds steady after a 2-0 week that featured a 90-84 win over Clemson and a 97-55 blowout of UTSA. In the Clemson game, the Tide did let a 19-point lead slip, but freshman Amari Allen had a breakout performance of his own and finished with 20 points and 11 rebounds. And now the Crimson Tide are 7-2 on the year, but their 2 losses are to 2 of the best teams in the country in Purdue and Gonzaga, and Nate Oates also didn't shy away from creating one of, if not the toughest schedules in all of college basketball, and Alabama has looked like the real deal so far, but a huge matchup with Arizona is next, and a win would almost guarantee a top 10 spot for the Crimson Tide. Next is Louisville, who dropped 5 spots to number 11 after suffering their first loss of the season, losing 89-80 against Arkansas. But the Cardinals responded well to the loss with an 87-78 win over Indiana in their very next game. And now, Louisville is 8-1, and the Cardinals remain firmly in the national title conversation for me. But there has been one big theme that has emerged with the team, and that's that they live and die by the 3. Louisville shot just 22% from 3 in their loss to Arkansas, but shot 42% from beyond the arc in their win over Indiana. So if the Cardinals can stay consistent from deep, a return to the top 10 could come quickly. But BYU is the the first team inside the top 10 at number 10 after a dominant 91-60 win over Cal Baptist this past week. And AJ Dubance continues to shine and looks like one of the best freshmen in the entire country and has scored 15 or more points in all 8 games so far this season. And the Cougars did technically fall one spot in this week's AP poll, but only because Gonzaga and Iowa State delivered huge ranked wins and jumped above them. But the Cougars already own a 98-70 win over previously ranked Wisconsin and continues to look like a legitimate contender to me. And another convincing victory over a good team should help the Cougars stay inside the top 10. Michigan State is up next and slipped back 2 spots to number 9 following a hard-fought 66-60 loss to Duke. And the matchup between the two Blue Bloods looked like it could have been a preview of something we would see in the Final Four this season, but unfortunately the Spartans were not able to pull out the win in that one. But before that, the Spartans opened the week with a 71-52 win over Big Ten foe Iowa, and their resume remains strong as they already are 4-1 in Quad 1 games this season. And the road gets a little easier for Michigan State now as they will face 5 unranked teams to finish out the month of December. But with what we've seen out of the Spartans so far, I wouldn't be surprised if we see Michigan State in the final weekend. The Gonzaga Bulldogs jumped back into the top 10 at number 8 after another dominant week that included a 35-point beatdown of Kentucky and a 51-point blowout of North Florida. And even after their huge loss to Michigan a few weeks ago, the analytics still love the Zags as they are number 3 overall in KenPom and are top 10 in adjusted efficiency on both ends of the floor. And to me, Gonzaga looks like a true contender, and I would actually have them a few spots higher than number 8. And this week, the Zags have another great matchup, and this time it's with number 25 ranked UCLA, and another big win should vault the Zags into the top 6 of the rankings. But just in front of the Zags is Kelvin Sampson and Houston, who climbed to number 7 after handling Florida State 82-67 and moving to 8-1 on the season. And the Cougars' only loss so far was a tight one to Tennessee at the Players Era Festival, but they're quietly working their way back. And so far, Houston hasn't faced the caliber of competition that other teams at the top have, but they still have quality wins over Auburn, Notre Dame, and Syracuse, which could age very well. And right now, it seems like Houston isn't getting the same spotlight as they have in previous years, and that's what makes me think they're so dangerous. And even though they haven't met expectations yet, this still looks every bit like a second weekend team who could make a run to the Final Four. Next is Purdue, who fell from number 1 all the way to number 6 after a stunning 81-58 home loss to Iowa State. And the 23-point loss tied the largest home defeat ever by a number 1 team. And in the game, Purdue could not defend the perimeter as the Cyclones shot nearly 48% from deep and overwhelmed the Boilermakers on both ends of the floor. And although one rough night doesn't define Purdue's season or ceiling, the Boilermakers must reset quickly as they have matchups with Minnesota and Marquette later this week. And then after that, Purdue will have another opportunity for a quality win with their matchup against Auburn, and I still think Purdue's ceiling remains national title high, but this setback may prove to be a reality check for the Boilermakers needed before conference play begins. UConn stayed locked in at number 5 after a 2-0 week that was highlighted by a gritty 61-56 win over Kansas inside Allen Fieldhouse. And after that, the Huskies defeated East Texas A&M 83-59 to move to 8-1 on the season. And with Braylon Mullins back healthy and Taurus Reed working his way toward full strength, UConn's ceiling remains arguably the highest in the nation to me. And their final major non-conference test comes this week against number 18 Florida, and a statement win there could push the Huskies even higher, especially if one of the top teams were to drop a game. And when fully healthy, this squad looks every bit like one of the best teams in college basketball. At number 4 is Iowa State, who skyrocketed up 6 spots in the rankings after what was probably the best win of any team this season in their 81-58 beatdown of the then number 1 ranked Purdue Boilermakers on the road. And the Cyclones now find themselves at 9-0 with ranked wins over Purdue and St. John's and are firmly in the national title race and maybe on track for their first number 1 ranking in school history. The trio of Taman Lipsey, Joshua Jefferson, and Milan Monkilovic continues to dominate on both ends and looks like one of, if not the best trios in the sport. And then role players like Killian Toure, Blake Buchanan, and Nate Heisey and others have all shown that they can step up when needed. And next, Iowa State has a rivalry game against Iowa, which would be another quality win to add to an already impressive resume. But coming in at number 3 is the team who might have the best resume in the entire country in the Duke Blue Devils, and in this week's poll, Duke had 6 first-place votes after a massive week that included ranked wins over Florida and a road victory against Michigan State. And the Blue Devils are now 10-0 on the season with 4 quad 1 wins, which is tied for the most in the nation. And Cameron Boozer continues to look like the top player in America to me as a freshman, and is fueling an offense and a defense that are both top 10 in adjusted efficiency. And if Duke keeps stacking ranked wins like they have been, it won't be long until they take the top spot in the AP poll. But above Duke is the Michigan Wolverines, who jumped to the number 2 spot after a dominating 8-0 start to the year. Recently, the Wolverines have been steamrolling opponents, outscoring their last 4 by a combined 151 points, including 3 programs that have recently been to a Final Four in Auburn, Gonzaga, and San Diego State. And to start Big Ten conference play, Michigan hammered Rutgers 101-60 this past week and extended their streak of 5 straight wins by at least 25 points. And right now, this team is firing on all cylinders and hasn't even been pushed since nearly slipping earlier on against TCU. And Michigan looks every bit like a national title favorite, and if I was ranking these teams, I would actually have them at my number 1 spot. But the team at the top of the AP poll is the Arizona Wildcats, which climbed to number 1 for the first time this season behind one of the nation's best resumes, with ranked wins over UConn, UCLA, Florida, and a 29-point domination of Auburn in their last game. And for Arizona, it's been Koa Pete and Jaden Bradley who have led the charge, but the Wildcats' other 5-star freshman Braden Burries has been breaking out recently, scoring 15-plus points in 3 straight games, which makes this team that much scarier. And with a record of 8-0 so far, and the resume they have put together, I'm not surprised that Arizona took the top spot, but a huge clash with Alabama is coming up this weekend, and a win there would only strengthen Arizona's case as the number 1 team in the nation. But that wraps it up for today's video. Let me know your thoughts on this week's AP Top 25 rankings in the comments down below. Also, if you enjoyed the content, don't forget to drop a like on the video and subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.